Hello, my name's Piper. My grandfather left my sister a luxury apartment in Manhattan, and me? He left a crumbling garage. Everyone smiled like it made perfect sense, like I should have been grateful for the scraps. But when I opened that garage, what I found inside didn't just change everything, it made me question what my family had been hiding for years. Why was my name cut from every photo? Why did my sister rush to sell the apartment before I ever saw the will? And why? Did Grandpa leave a video just for me, whispering truths no one else wanted to hear? What exactly did I walk into when I unlocked that garage door? I pulled into the parking lot behind the lawyer's office 10 minutes early, but I still felt late. The weight in my stomach wasn't from nerves, it was something heavier, more familiar. That quiet ache you feel when you already know the ending, but you show up anyway, hoping maybe this time you're wrong. The receptionist looked up and gave a stiff smile when I stepped in. Her eyes darted down to her screen as if to avoid small talk. I didn't mind. I wasn't in the mood for it either. Inside the conference room, the chairs were too firm, the lighting too bright, and the air smelled faintly like stale printer paper. I took the seat at the far end of the table. No one had told me who else would be here today, but I had my guesses. The door opened, and there she was. Isolde. 5 minutes late, but walking like she owned the hour. She wore her usual neutral-toned power suit, hair slicked back like every press conference photo of her that made it into the business section. She glanced at me, lips barely twitching. "You made it," she said, like I'd almost forgotten the will involved me at all. And then, unexpectedly, Rainer, my ex-husband. He walked in behind her, carrying nothing but his phone. Our eyes met, and he nodded once, a meaningless gesture loaded with everything we hadn't said for years. I should have left then. Denton Vall, our family lawyer, cleared his throat and shuffled papers at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming. I'll be brief," he said, voice dry as copy paper. He began reading Grandpa's last will. It wasn't long. Most of it sounded exactly like I expected. No surprise beneficiaries, no strange charities. Then came the moment I didn't want, but had rehearsed in my head 100 times. To my granddaughter Isolde, I leave the Manhattan apartment located at, he read the address, prime real estate, high ceilings, Central Park views. I'd visited it once when Grandpa was still alive. Just once. Denton's eyes didn't meet mine as he continued. To my granddaughter Piper, I leave the garage unit located at another address, Albany, industrial zone. Forgotten corner of the city, a place where cars went to die and memories to rust. There was a silence, not the respectful kind, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that follows a slap you're not supposed to react to. Isolde chuckled softly. "That suits you better," she said. "Quiet, crumbling, just like your life." No one corrected her. Rainer smirked, a calculated twitch at the edge of his mouth. He leaned back in his chair like he was watching a comedy show. I didn't speak. What was there to say? Denton cleared his throat again, as if to move things along. "That concludes the reading." And just like that, it was over. We walked out without handshakes. Isolde didn't even look at me. Rainer stayed behind with her, whispering something that made her laugh as they turned into Denton's private office. I walked to my car, fumbling with my keys. My hand was shaking, but not from anger, not yet. Back at the house, no, his house now, I stood at the kitchen counter, holding the papers like they might change if I stared long enough. Rainer was in the living room, pouring himself a drink. "I don't know why you look so surprised," he said without turning. "You've always been the background noise in that family." I set the papers down. "It's still something. He didn't have to leave anything," Rainer scoffed. "And yet somehow, even your something is worthless." I didn't respond. He took a sip, then set the glass down harder than necessary. 15 years, Piper. 15? And what do you bring home? A garage? You were always more burden than blessing." I blinked. Once. Twice. "This house," I began. "We built it together." He laughed. Cold. Flat. "Your librarian's salary barely paid for groceries. I carried this, and now you're done here." "What?" You heard me. I want you out by tomorrow. I looked around the house. The couch I picked, the curtains I hemmed, the dining table where we ate microwave dinners while he answered work emails. All of it, suddenly foreign. You don't have the right. I have the mortgage. I have the lawyer. You have a garage. That was it. I packed in silence. A single suitcase, clothes, a few books. I left the wedding photos in the drawer. I left the house key on the counter, careful not to let my fingers linger too long. When I stepped outside, it had started to drizzle. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. I had a garage address in my coat pocket and nothing else. I walked to the bus stop. My suitcase wheels caught in cracks in the sidewalk. No one offered help. I didn't expect them to. By the time I reached the bench, the drizzle had turned into steady rain. I sat, staring down at my lap, watching raindrops collect on my coat sleeve. 15 years. 15 years, and this was how it ended. A rusted-out storage unit. I pulled out the folded paper. The address was faded, but still legible. I typed it into my phone. The pin dropped in the middle of nowhere. An old industrial zone near the train tracks. I almost laughed. I boarded the night bus without thinking. The driver barely glanced at me. I slid into a seat near the back, the suitcase beside me like a dead weight. As we pulled away from the stop, I rested my head against the window. A memory bubbled up. Grandpa, years ago, reaching out to ruffle my hair during a backyard barbecue. A moment so brief, I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. But now I clung to it. Maybe the garage wasn't an insult. Maybe it was something else. A code. A message. I slid my hand into my coat pocket and felt the key there. Old. Heavy. Cold, even through the fabric. I didn't know what I was walking toward, but I knew what I was leaving behind. The ride took longer than I expected. Maybe it was the route the driver chose. Maybe it was just the way time drags when you're alone with your thoughts. The city had begun to blur into something unrecognizable. Pockets of concrete, graffiti-tagged fences, and warehouses that looked like they'd given up decades ago. The bus hissed to a stop at a corner that had no name, just an old billboard advertising a storage facility that no longer existed. I stepped off, suitcase in one hand, the folded garage deed clutched in the other. There wasn't anyone around, just the hum of a distant train and the kind of silence that made you feel like the air itself was holding its breath. The address wasn't far from the stop. I found myself walking slower the closer I got, not because I was tired, though my feet ached, but because I wasn't sure what I was hoping for anymore. As I turned the final corner, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. Denton Vall. I hesitated for a second before answering. Piper. His voice came through low, cautious. Hi, Denton, I said, trying not to sound as worn out as I felt. I assume you've reviewed the documents, he continued. Not exactly. I wanted to ask for a full copy of the will, the notarized one, I said, steadying my voice. There was a pause. Not the kind where someone's thinking, more like the kind where they're choosing their next lie. There's not much else to send, Piper. What you were read, well, that was it. Come on, I said, keeping my tone even. You and I both know there's always more on paper than what's said aloud in a 5-minute meeting. Another pause. Everything's in order. You got what your grandfather designated. Then send me the original, or at least a certified copy. Legally, I'm not required to provide that, he said quickly. Best to let it go. Let it go. The same words I'd heard in different voices for most of my life. From teachers, boyfriends, even my own mother. I didn't argue. Not now. Thanks, Denton, I said quietly, then hung up. Almost immediately, another notification appeared on my screen. A text message. Isolde. You should be grateful he left you anything at all. I didn't even react. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started typing something. I don't even remember what, but then deleted it. There wasn't a version of that reply that would have made a difference. I reopened the paper from Grandpa's envelope. The garage address was there in his handwriting, familiar loops. He'd signed it with a little underline beneath his name, like always. I folded it again and shoved it back into my coat. The industrial zone stretched before me like a maze built for no one. I passed broken windows, weeds clawing through cement, and rusted mailboxes with numbers long faded. A light drizzle had started again, and I adjusted the collar of my coat. My shoes were wet, my hands numb, but something inside me was alert, like a quiet drumbeat had started deep in my chest. "You're not the girl who begs anymore," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard me. I found the building. A long stretch of identical garage doors, all dented and faded in different shades of gray and green. Number 237 was painted in peeling red above the third door from the end. I walked up to it. The lock looked as old as the building, rusted but intact. I pulled out the key the notary had handed me. It felt strange in my palm, heavy, personal. I slid the key into the lock. It didn't budge. I turned it gently, then with more pressure. Finally, a click. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed. It sounded like something old giving way. My breath caught in my throat. I wrapped my fingers around the handle but didn't pull. Not yet. I wasn't ready. My skin prickled, not from the cold, but from the way everything suddenly felt too still. I stepped back, eyes fixed on the door. Whatever was behind it would still be there tomorrow. But once I opened it, I couldn't pretend anymore. I turned around and spotted a little diner across the street. The neon sign above it blinked weakly, but it was open. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. Warmth wrapped around me, the kind that smelled like coffee and fryer oil. An older waitress glanced up from behind the counter. "Sit anywhere," she said, then turned back to pouring soda. I slid into a booth by the window. From there, I could see the garage door. I ordered black coffee. When it arrived, I cradled it like it might offer more comfort than conversation ever had. I pulled my phone from my coat and stared at the screen. No new messages, no missed calls. Of course not. I opened a blank note and typed one line. Garage 237, Albany. Key works. Then I just stared at it. My thoughts wandered to childhood summers when Grandpa would take me fishing while Isolde stayed home complaining about the bugs. To the time he helped me fix a flat tire, even though I'd been too embarrassed to ask. To the night I called him crying after Mom died, and he just sat on the phone with me for 40 silent minutes. He hadn't been a warm man, not in the traditional sense, but he had never once dismissed me. He noticed things. He remembered the smallest details. He told me I had the patience of a chess player and the heart of someone who didn't need a trophy to know she'd won. And then, he gave me a garage. I sipped my coffee and stared through the glass at that rusted door. There were too many questions and not enough answers. Why that garage? Why that address? And why leave the apartment to Isolde if he'd known what she really was? The waitress came by and refilled my cup without asking. I nodded in thanks. My phone buzzed once more. Rainer. Hope you're settling into your new kingdom. Don't scratch the concrete. I deleted it. I stayed in that booth until the coffee went cold, until the lights in the diner dimmed for closing, until the fear that had been following me all day finally started to feel like something else. Resolve. I stayed in the diner until the last refill of coffee turned cold and the hum of the overhead lights gave me a headache. The waitress, who hadn't said a word beyond anything else, slid my bill onto the table with a quiet nod, like she understood that I wasn't there for the coffee, just somewhere to be where no one would ask anything of me. After paying, I stepped outside. The drizzle had stopped, but the air was thick with that damp, metallic scent the pavement always held after hours of mist. Across the street, the garage waited. Number 237. No lights, no welcome mat. Just a strip of rust across the bottom and chipped paint hanging on by a thread. The walk back took longer than it should have. My body was moving, but my mind was stuck elsewhere, drifting between the now and the then. By the time I reached the door, the moon had risen high enough to cast silver slivers across the lot. I stood there a full minute before reaching for the handle. My fingers didn't hesitate this time. The door creaked open with a slow, metallic groan. It sounded like breath held too long finally escaping. Inside, the air didn't reek of mold or dust like I expected. In fact, it smelled faintly clean, not sanitized, more like someone had opened a window and let time in. I stepped inside and flicked on the flashlight from my phone. The beam landed on a plain metal chair in the corner and a small wooden table beside it. The table was empty, save for a chipped ceramic mug and what looked like a folded napkin under it. Against the back wall sat a large object covered by a heavy green tarp. It was too angular to be a couch, too low for a workbench. I didn't move toward it, not yet. My eyes were drawn to the wall above the table. There, on a bent nail, hung something that hit me harder than the cold. Grandpa's old canvas jacket. He used to wear that to the lake every summer, the one with the frayed collar and a missing button near the chest. I stepped closer and reached for it, my hands trembling as I pulled it off the hook. It was heavier than I remembered, faded patches at the elbows and in the left pocket, something firm. I slid my hand inside and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the edges and folded in half. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. Not to Piper or my dear granddaughter, just Piper. No frills, just direct like him. I sat down in the metal chair, unfolded the envelope, and found a single photograph inside. It was old, taken with a film camera. In the picture, I was maybe 6 years old, arms wrapped around Grandpa's legs as he crouched beside me. We were in front of the lake house. I remembered that day, barely. The photo had burn marks around the edges. Someone had torn it from a larger photo, one that used to hang in the family hallway. I hadn't seen it in years. On the back, in faded ink, Grandpa had scribbled one line. "You saw me before they needed me." Taped behind the photo was a torn piece of notebook paper, a string of numbers and letters, 37 VHL. I stared at it for a while. It didn't make sense right away, but I tucked it into my notebook. If there was one thing I'd learned about Grandpa, it was that nothing he left behind was meaningless. The chair creaked as I stood. My flashlight scanned the rest of the garage. Something was off about the floor. Near the tarp, the concrete had faint scrape marks, like something had been dragged. Not long ago. I looked at the tarp again. My hand twitched, ready to pull it back. But something told me not yet. Not alone. Not when the air still felt like it held a secret. I backed away slowly, locking the garage door behind me. I needed light. I needed sleep. I needed to think. The walk back to the motel was quiet. Albany's industrial district had settled into its usual nocturnal hush, broken only by the occasional bark of a dog or the screech of metal in the wind. I kept the photo tight in my coat pocket, like it might disappear if I loosened my grip. When I got to my room, I peeled off the damp coat and laid the photo on the nightstand. The clock read just past 1 a.m., but my mind didn't feel tired, only wired, like it was straining to connect pieces not yet cut to fit. I pulled out an old notebook from my bag, the one I used for shopping lists, thoughts, random lines that popped into my head and had nowhere else to live. I opened a blank page and wrote, Garage 237, jacket, photo, code ALS 37 VHL, check with Denton. Tarp, large object, scrape marks, clean space, someone's been here recently. Why would Grandpa leave me this? I stopped writing and stared at the last line. The truth was, Grandpa hadn't left me nothing, he'd left me something different, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was meant for me, and only me. I thought back to Christmas when I was 11. We'd been given turns to ride a new sled Grandpa brought out to the hill behind the house. Isolde had demanded to go first, and second. I gave up my spot. I remember standing by the tree line, holding my mittens, teeth chattering while everyone clapped for her. Later, when the noise faded and everyone went inside, Grandpa stayed behind. He walked over, handed me a thermos of hot cocoa and said nothing, just sat beside me on the cold bench. Another memory, awards night, junior year. I'd been shortlisted for a writing contest. But the night came and went, and they never called my name. Isolde won for math. Mom and Dad were thrilled. Grandpa? He found me backstage afterward, pulled a peppermint from his pocket and said, "They don't see it yet. That doesn't mean it's not there." He always saw the quiet things, the ones too small for trophies or applause. I picked up the photo again and traced the edges, the burn marks, the tear. He hadn't forgotten me. He remembered what they chose not to. And now, standing on the edge of something I didn't yet understand, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't just given this garage, I was pointed toward it. And Grandpa never pointed without purpose. By the time the sun peeked through the cheap motel blinds, I'd barely slept. The photo, the code, the silence hanging in that garage like something sacred. It all looped in my head, keeping my nerves lit like a string of faulty Christmas lights. I got up, dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, brushed my teeth with the travel kit I'd picked up at the front desk, and made a mental list of what I needed. I stopped at a hardware store on the corner before heading back to the garage. Bought a flashlight, a screwdriver, a small crowbar, and gloves. The cashier didn't ask questions. I didn't offer any. I grabbed a gas station coffee across the street and headed straight to 237. The key worked again, this time smoothly, like the garage had accepted my return. I stepped inside, sunlight now slipping in through the top windows. The light made everything look different. Less eerie, more intentional. I stood in front of the tarp-covered shape. Whatever it wasn't just storage. It had presence. I took a breath, then another, before grabbing the edge of the canvas and tugging it down. The fabric fell away in one slow pull, revealing a deep black 1957 Ford Thunderbird, spotless, gleaming, not a fingerprint or speck of dust on the hood. It looked like it had been waxed yesterday. The chrome reflected light like water. This wasn't a forgotten relic. This was preservation. This was love. Grandpa had once told me, back when I was a teenager, that there were things you gave to people because they were loud enough to demand them. And then there were things you saved for those who didn't ask but noticed everything. The Thunderbird wasn't just a car. It was a story that hadn't been told yet. I circled it slowly, eyes catching on the door handle, the smooth curve of the back window, the leather seats that had somehow aged without cracking. When I opened the driver's side door, it released a soft puff of air, like the breath of something waiting to be remembered. I slipped into the seat. My knees barely fit under the wheel. It wasn't made for women built like me, but I didn't care. The scent of old leather and steel hung in the air. I slid my fingers along the floor, then under the seat, searching for anything out of place. The carpet gave a bit under pressure, and I felt something metal click beneath my palm. A small panel shifted. Hidden compartment. My pulse kicked up as I reached inside. A thick envelope, cream-colored, heavy with time. The flap sealed. No writing on the outside, just a small ink stamp of a tree. I hesitated, just a second, then cracked the seal and pulled out the contents. Documents. Legal ones. A notarized will, dated 6 weeks after the one Isolde used to claim Grandpa's apartment. I skimmed, eyes darting line to line, as if the words might vanish before I could hold on to them. To my granddaughter, Piper Caldwell. I leave the apartment located at 14 East 81st Street, New York, NYC. I reread it. Again. And again. The garage, according to this, had been left to Isolde. The envelope also contained a note in Grandpa's handwriting, steady and neat, just like the grocery lists he used to post on the fridge. Denton knows. He has a copy. You deserve what was truly meant for you. I let the papers settle in my lap. There it was. Not just a mistake corrected, not just a property transfer, but a message. He had changed his mind, and he had trusted me to find it. I took out my phone and snapped high-resolution pictures of each page, front and back, with date and timestamps. I emailed copies to myself, then uploaded them to a cloud folder labeled Piper, Private. I copied that link and pasted it into a draft email I wasn't ready to send, yet. I sat in that car a long time. The morning grew into late afternoon. The smell of grease and metal became oddly comforting. I stared at the letter in Grandpa's handwriting. My mind drifted back to the summer before he got sick. I'd helped him clean out his attic. Found a box of old photos. Isolde had popped in, stayed 10 minutes, and then claimed later that she'd helped sort everything. He never corrected her, but afterward, when we were alone, he said, "She's good at telling stories that make her look golden, but you live the truth even when no one's watching." I hadn't known what to make of it then. Now I did. Back in the motel, I laid everything out again on the bed. Documents, notes, the photo of me and Grandpa, now looking less like a relic and more like evidence. I read every word of the will again. Then once more, slowly. The last page held one final line, handwritten in the margin. Don't let someone rewrite you. That night, with my laptop open, I typed a single text. Short, sharp. To the sister who thought I'd stay quiet, turn on your email tomorrow. The message didn't need more than one line. You might want to call Denton before you list that apartment. I hit send, placed the phone face down on the motel nightstand, and walked to the bathroom to wash my face. The mirror reflected a woman who didn't flinch anymore. The woman who had walked out of Rayner's house 2 nights ago looked like she'd fallen through a trap door. But the one staring back now? She'd landed. I dried my face slowly, letting the cheap towel scratch across my cheeks. In the next room, my phone buzzed again. I left it ringing for a beat or two before walking back. One reply from Isolde. That was it. No, hey, no, what's this about? No exclamation points. Just 3 question marks, like she couldn't be bothered to spell out confusion the old-fashioned way. I didn't answer. Instead, I took a slow sip from the lukewarm mug of motel coffee and refreshed my browser. A new tab had been open for hours, one I'd checked repeatedly, more from instinct than reason. And then, there it was. 14 East 81st, for sale by owner. She'd listed it. My apartment, the one Grandpa had willed to me. The price was slashed by nearly $200,000 compared to others in the building. Urgent, as if she knew the foundation of her claim was made of rotted wood and paper. I stared at the screen, lips tightening. If I didn't know the game, I would have thought she was panicking. But Isolde never panicked. She calculated. That condo wasn't just her home. It was her brand, her castle, her skyline view stage. And now she was trying to offload it before the curtain dropped. I scrolled through the photos. She'd redecorated it since Grandpa passed. Neutral palette, cold marble counters, no trace of history, not a photo of him anywhere. No evidence he'd once paced that hallway in his slippers, muttering about the thermostat. I closed the laptop, and then the memory hit me, out of nowhere. It must have been 8 years back. I'd asked Rayner if we could move closer to my work. I was commuting 90 minutes each way. The library barely had parking, and winters were hard. He'd said no, flat out. Not in the budget, he'd said over dinner, stabbing his steak like it owed him something. But a week later, Isolde had bought a vacation condo upstate, called it an investment. You could always carpool, Reiner had told me. Think smarter, not harder. Looking back, it was so obvious. I was never supposed to have more, just enough to stay still, stay grateful, and stay quiet. The phone buzzed again. This time she called. I answered. Piper? Isolde said, voice smooth like a conference call. That was a cute little message you sent. Want to tell me what it means? I think it's self-explanatory, I replied, keeping my tone even. There was a pause, then a shift in her breath. What do you want? I want what Grandpa wanted, for once. She exhaled through her nose, sharp and short. You were always the sentimental one, always confusing affection for attention. I stayed silent. She continued, her voice dipping an octave. You know he pitied you, right? That's why you got the garage. He didn't think you could handle anything more. You mean like you handled his apartment? I asked. You don't get it, she snapped. He changed the will, but he never filed it. So legally, that apartment is mine. That was it. Her words landed soft and loud all at once. She'd said too much. I didn't respond. Just reached over and tapped the record button on my phone screen. I'd already hit it 2 minutes into the call, on a hunch. I'm not going to debate the law with you, Piper, she added. You've always been better with books than real life. Then you should have stayed quiet. Another pause. This one longer. Is this what you're doing now? Playing detective with a garage full of rust? No, I said. I'm just making sure I don't disappear again. She scoffed. You were never invisible. You just weren't necessary. I didn't hang up. She did. Without goodbye. Without anything. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I pulled the recording, trimmed it, and saved a backup copy to a hidden folder. The rest of the day passed in half light. I picked up dinner from a corner market, scribbled a few notes in my notebook, and watched the rain return outside the motel window. Later that evening, I opened my laptop and started drafting an email. The kind of email that didn't scream, it whispered just loud enough to ruin someone's week. I attached the scanned copy of Grandpa's final will. I attached the audio file, Isolde's voice, clear and smug. I added a screenshot of the apartment listing time-stamped before the call. I included a note written in plain language. I am requesting formal legal review of a contested estate property. Below is supporting documentation of intent and obstruction. I didn't send it, not yet, but I saved the draft and backed that up too, because now she knew I wasn't the scared little sister anymore. The motel room was silent, save for the hum of the mini-fridge and the occasional groan of pipes inside the walls. I sat by the desk, light from my laptop casting shadows across my face as I reviewed the draft email one more time. I wasn't planning to send it just yet, but it sat there, locked and loaded, a quiet grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. I closed the lid and leaned back. My coffee had gone cold. Again. An hour later, I walked into the small cafe on Madison, just off the main strip in Albany. It was one of those places that hadn't changed much since the 80s. Wood-paneled booths, squeaky ceiling fans, and a laminated menu that still listed liver and onions as a Tuesday special. That's where I found Marla. She was already seated near the window, a teacup steaming in front of her. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, sure, but still sharp. Her eyes met mine the moment I stepped in. She waved me over like we'd just seen each other last week. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. I slid into the booth. "Thanks for meeting me," she smiled. "Piper Caldwell." "Still wearing flannel in April," I chuckled. "Some habits die hard." She nodded once, then her tone softened. "I heard about your granddad. I'm sorry. He was a good one." I stared at my hands. "Yeah, he was." We made small talk for a few minutes, but it didn't take long before she leaned forward, voice low. "You know," she said, "that time he fell in the kitchen and needed the ambulance, wasn't that you who covered the cost?" I blinked. "You remember that?" "I do, because I was the one who helped him into the chair until they got there. He said you paid it, told me not to tell anyone." My throat tightened. I nodded. "No one ever did." She leaned back. "Funny thing, at the wake, your sister told everyone she'd taken care of all his medical bills. She made it sound like she'd been his live-in nurse." The tightness in my chest twisted into something deeper, familiar, sharp. "She always did know how to write her own script," I muttered. "Sure did," Marla said. "But you were there. Quiet, but always there. I just thought you should know that some of us noticed." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." After we said goodbye, I walked slowly back to the motel. No rush. No need. The wheels in my head were already turning. The bitterness I'd been trying to suppress all week had finally found its fuel. By nightfall, I had spread everything across the motel bed, like evidence in a courtroom. The notarized will, the real one, the audio recording from Isolde's outburst, a scanned copy of Grandpa's note, the photo of me as a little girl hugging him, the torn corner, the handwriting on the back, and then the final piece. I dug through an old box in my car, something I hadn't opened since the divorce. Inside, buried under old files and expired insurance cards, was a faded hospital receipt, Albany General, emergency visit, ambulance fee, paid in full by P. Caldwell. I scanned it, added it to the folder, and labeled it Caregiving, Undisclosed. It wasn't about proving I was better. It was about showing that I had been there all along. At 6:43 a.m., I composed the email, addressed it to Cairo Ames, a journalist known for cutting through legal fog like a hot knife through butter. She'd written a piece last year on a family business empire that had silenced a whistleblower daughter. She didn't hold back. My subject line was simple: estate fraud, documented evidence enclosed. I didn't write a long note, I attached everything. I let the documents speak. And at 7:02 a.m. I hit send. Then I put my phone down, poured a cup of black coffee, and sat in the only chair by the window. The motel TV was on mute. The world outside had started to stir. Trucks on the highway, a couple of kids walking to school. The city moved on like it always did. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Then again, by 8:20, it hadn't stopped. Cairo had published the article. Headline: The Forgotten Sister and the $1 Million Lie. The story broke down everything. How the original will had been replaced, the timeline of property transfer, the contradicting statements from Isolde, and the cold proof of Piper Caldwell's long-buried role in her grandfather's care. Screenshots of my documents filled the article. Quotes from Grandpa's notes were printed in bold. You deserve what was truly meant for you. Within an hour, the hashtags began trending. Hashtag Forgotten Daughter. Hashtag Will Truth. Hash Isolde Exposed. I didn't respond to messages. I didn't call anyone. But I watched. Emails poured in. Journalists asking for comments. A local news anchor requesting an interview. Old college classmates apologizing for not knowing. Strangers writing things like, "This happened to me too," and "Thank you for telling the truth." But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I imagined Isolde waking up to her phone lighting up with the headlines, the forwarded links, the silent dread only someone who knows the truth and knows they buried it could feel. I sat back in my chair, the mug warm in my hands, and just breathed. She had built her life on silence and stolen credit, but now, silence was mine, and it had teeth. The article had only been live for 6 hours, but the fallout arrived faster than a thunderclap. I didn't have to refresh the page to know it was spreading. My inbox was proof enough. Every few minutes, a new name popped up. Some I recognized from high school. Some were local reporters fishing for comment. Others were strangers, their subject lines just one word. Finally. Thank you. Truth. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I watched the ripple hit Isolde first. At 10:11 a.m., she released a public clarification through her PR contact. It was buried 3 paragraphs into a bland statement posted on LinkedIn, of all places, worded like a quarterly financial update. There appear to be misleading claims circulating online regarding my late grandfather's estate. These statements are being reviewed by legal counsel. Out of respect for my family, I will not be engaging further in the public sphere. The comments shredded her. Gaslighter. Nice PR spin, Isolde. Out of respect? Since when? Typical. Blame the whistleblower. The sarcasm was brutal. I didn't laugh. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because I knew better. This was the first move in her counterattack, not a surrender. By lunchtime, the retaliation started in full. My old boss from the library, Mr. Yates, called me from a blocked number. I answered only because I thought it might be Cairo. Piper? He asked, voice hesitant. I got a call this morning from someone asking if you'd ever shown signs of erratic behavior on the job. I stood still. Excuse me? They said you might be unwell and wanted confirmation. I exhaled slowly. Did they say who they were? No, just anonymous concern. I told them nothing, but you should know, something's being stirred. They're trying to erase me again, I said, more to myself than to him. I'm sorry, Piper. I never believed any of that, you know. I know. Thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I checked my phone. There it was. A video clip, posted by some blog that specialized in scandal and gossip. Rainer, looking camera-ready, sitting across from a 20-something host wearing too much cologne and not enough tact. The title of the segment: Ex-Husband Speaks, Piper Caldwell's Troubled Past. Rainer sat there with that familiar half-smile, the same one he used when he was about to gaslight me into thinking the way he spoke to me wasn't abuse, just being direct. Piper was complicated, he said, folding his hands. I loved her, I did, but she always had a hard time trusting people. She saw conspiracies where there weren't any. She was never quite, well. The host leaned in. Do you think she's making all this up? I think grief does strange things to people, Rainer replied, calmly, compassionately, fraudulently. I closed the video, not out of shock, but to stop myself from throwing the phone. It was textbook. Undermine her credibility. Plant the seed. Watch it grow. I booked a train to Manhattan that evening. It wasn't dramatic or impulsive. It was math. I needed to be face to face with someone who'd helped build the illusion that had nearly buried me. I needed to look Denton Vall in the eye. His office hadn't changed in 20 years, still carpeted in beige, still the same wooden plaques on the wall, law degrees, framed family photos, and a quote from Lincoln that had always made me roll my eyes. You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. He looked startled when I walked in. Piper, he said. I wasn't expecting— No, I said. You weren't. He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. I assume you've read the article. I have. And? He sighed, took off his glasses, and wiped them slowly. This is going to get very messy. It already is. He hesitated. You need to consider what this is costing you. Reputations are fragile. Yours is already being challenged. Because you let her walk out with a lie. He stiffened. That's not fair. What's not fair, I said, voice low, is watching someone steal a piece of my life and then paint me as unstable for daring to pull back the curtain. He looked away. I reached into my bag and placed the signed, notarized will on his desk. Then I set my phone down, already recording. I'm not here to beg, I said. I'm here to finish this. His eyes locked onto mine. He didn't blink. You realize what she'll do if this goes further. I do, I said, and I'm not afraid of her anymore. That night, Cairo sent me a text. They're desperate, it read. That's how you know they're losing, I typed back. Then let's end it. She had dragged me through the mud, but now I had the match that would set her paper kingdom on fire. The courthouse sat like a fortress of glass and steel, reflecting back the very city it was built to serve. I stood in front of it for a moment, watching people flow in and out like ants, lawyers with briefcases, families holding hands, defendants pacing outside in nervous circles. I took a breath and stepped through the revolving doors. I wasn't here to ask for anything. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to let the truth walk in beside me and speak for itself. Security was tight, but routine. Inside, the air felt refrigerated and sterile, like truth didn't matter unless it came printed and stamped. Courtroom 4B was already buzzing by the time I entered. Reporters occupied the back rows. Cairo was among them, her notepad closed, her focus trained on the defense table like a sniper watching a moving target. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table beside my attorney, a woman named Lauren who didn't talk much unless it counted. Then came Isolde. She walked in wearing a blazer worth more than a month of my salary back when I still had a job. Her hair was pulled tight, her makeup flawless. She smiled at the cameras like she was stepping into a fundraising gala, not a courtroom. Behind her trailed her lawyer, tall, sharp, reeking of confidence. He was the type who probably had custom suits and a divorce pending. She glanced my way, but her eyes barely held. Then she turned and whispered something to her attorney, who chuckled. We didn't speak. The judge entered, and the room stood. The trial began with formality, as they all do. Names entered into record. Affidavits acknowledged. The judge, a woman in her 60s with eyes that didn't miss much, read through the summary with clinical ease. Then it was time. Lauren stood first. She laid it out plainly. The updated will, the signature, the timeline that proved not only the legitimacy of the document, but the intentional delay in filing. She presented the bank records, showing the hasty transfer of the apartment deed within days of Grandpa's passing. She even displayed the handwritten note Grandpa left behind. Denton knows. Then, the recording played. Isolde's voice filled the courtroom. He changed the will but never filed it. So legally, that apartment is mine. Silence followed. I glanced toward the defense table. Isolde's smile had vanished. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something. Her hands tightened on the armrests. Then Denton Vall was called. He looked older than I remembered, like the last month had taken more from him than the last decade. He avoided my gaze as he took the stand. Under oath, he confirmed the signature. He confirmed the date. He confirmed the conversation in which Grandpa had asked for a quiet revision, one he never legally filed out of deference to family unity. He was clear, Denton said softly. He believed Piper had been overlooked. He wanted to correct that. Isolde's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. The defense tried their best to regain footing. Isolde's attorney launched into a soliloquy about family tensions, emotional manipulation, Grandpa's fragile state of mind. They submitted notes from a therapist he'd seen once, 10 years ago, about early-onset forgetfulness. They called it circumstantial. They called the will a narrative shaped by grief and guilt. I said nothing. Then Lauren introduced Exhibit E, Cairo's article, verified sources, cross-referenced documents, interviews with neighbors and care providers, proof of my presence, proof of Isolde's absence. The court clerk scrolled through it on a large screen while the jury read in silence. Then it was Rayner's turn. He was called as a surprise witness. He walked to the stand slowly, like a man approaching a final confession. His tailored jacket looked stiff, his jaw set with that same rehearsed tension I remembered too well. He tried to play it safe, said he had no knowledge of the updated will, no involvement in the deed transfer, said he supported both sisters equally, but under cross-examination, cracks formed. When asked if he'd ever benefited financially from Isolde's real estate dealings, he fumbled. When asked if he'd ever repeated derogatory comments about my mental health in public, he dodged. When presented with a transcript of his blog interview, he backpedaled hard, his face flushed, his voice cracked. It was the first time in 15 years that I watched him falter without needing to say a word. After closing arguments, the judge recessed briefly. I waited. When she returned, she spoke with gravity. The court finds the updated will valid. The Manhattan property shall be transferred back to the rightful heir, Piper Caldwell, as outlined in the document. Any prior transactions made under the contested deed shall be reversed. Isolde didn't move. Her lawyer leaned back like he'd just lost a bet he never thought he'd placed. Then I stood. Your Honor, I said calmly, I appreciate the ruling, but I'm not here to claim property. I'm here to correct the record. She raised an eyebrow. I decline the property. Let the court hold it in trust. I only wanted the truth to have a place again. The judge paused, nodded once. So noted. Outside, the press swarmed like vultures. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. Cairo caught my eye from across the street and gave a slight nod. I returned it. The headlines arrived by evening. Board member under scrutiny following will fraud case. High-profile exec loses civil case to estranged sister. Truth, not inheritance, wins in estate battle. Isolde's company issued a formal statement. Internal review pending. Her board seat was suspended. Her calendar of speaking engagements disappeared. Rayner deleted his social media account. And me? I stepped into the crosswalk, the light blinking yellow. A breeze pushed against me as I moved forward, slow but sure. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. Justice wasn't loud, but it was heard. And now, there was only one place left to return to. The train ride back to Albany was long, but mercifully quiet. I sat by the window, forehead against the cool glass, watching the city recede until all that remained were trees, silos, and the occasional worn billboard offering furniture deals or miracle dentures. My body was exhausted, but my mind had settled into a calm I hadn't known in years. When I stepped off at the station, there was no fanfare, no reporters, no cameras, just the hush of a town that had always existed slightly behind the times. I caught a cab and gave the driver the old garage address. He didn't question it, just nodded and drove. We passed familiar intersections, empty parking lots, and rundown businesses. By the time we reached the alleyway behind the garage units, the light was beginning to dip into that soft, golden hour glow. I paid, got out, and stood still for a moment with my bag slung over my shoulder. Then I unlocked the door. The garage smelled like old leather and motor oil and memories. The Thunderbird still sat under the tarp, untouched, waiting. There was comfort in that, the quiet presence of something that hadn't been taken, manipulated, or rewritten. I dropped my backpack gently on the floor, turned on the small desk lamp Grandpa had bolted to the wall, and just breathed. About 20 minutes later, I heard the knock. Not loud, not urgent, just respectful. I opened the door to find Mrs. Duval standing there, wrapped in a cardigan and holding a folded newspaper. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, handing it over. The headline read, "Inheritance Dispute Ends in Truth, Not Possession." Below it, a black and white photo of me walking out of the courtroom, eyes forward, mouth closed. She looked over my shoulder into the garage. "He used to sit out here," she said softly. "Even when it got cold. Wouldn't say much, but he always had your name on his lips. Said you were the only one who saw the world differently." I swallowed, throat tightening. He was the only one who saw me at all. Mrs. Duval nodded, gave my hand a soft squeeze, and left. Later that night, with the heater humming faintly in the corner and a single bulb casting a soft yellow glow, I opened the drawer under the workbench. Inside was an old camcorder. I remembered it vaguely from family barbecues and birthdays. Grandpa always preferred being behind the camera, not in front of it. The battery was dead, but thankfully, a charger sat coiled beside it. I plugged it in, waited until the blinking light turned steady green, and hit play. The screen flickered. Then there he was, Grandpa, sitting in this very garage, jacket zipped up halfway, hair a little more unkempt than usual. "If you're watching this, Piper," he began, his voice gravel and warmth, "then I did what I had to do. Not for justice, just for truth. I couldn't fix what they broke when you were little, but I could make sure they didn't steal your silence too." I pressed pause, wiped my eyes, then hit play again. "I know you felt invisible, overlooked, but it was never because you lacked anything. It's because you didn't perform like they did. You didn't scream to be seen. You just watched. You listened." "And people forget how dangerous that can be," he chuckled. "I always knew you'd do the hard thing, the right thing. You have more strength than they'll ever understand." When the video ended, I didn't cry. Not really. A few tears slipped, but it wasn't sadness. It was recognition. Someone had finally named what I'd carried for decades, and it came from the one voice I never doubted. I stood and crossed to the box in the corner where I'd stored the last of the family keepsakes. Inside was the photo, once torn, now taped carefully at the edges, the one of all of us. I had found the missing piece tucked inside an old notebook Grandpa left behind. My image had been cut out, then reattached with aged tape. It wasn't perfect, but it was whole. I didn't frame it. I didn't hang it on the wall. I slid it into the drawer beside the video. I didn't need to hang it to remember who I was. The next morning, I started writing again. Not a memoir, not a tell-all. Just small things. Observations. Things I noticed on walks. Conversations with strangers. Bits of dialogue I'd once overheard at the library that now made me smile. 2 weeks later, I applied for a job at a local bookstore. Small, independently run. They needed someone who loved books and didn't mind lifting boxes. I was overqualified, but they hired me anyway. I moved into a little cottage just outside town. Nothing fancy, a fireplace that worked, a garden I'd have to learn how to manage. No one knew my last name unless I offered it. One evening, after stocking shelves and wiping down counters, I walked past the garage. I paused at the door, didn't go in, just stood there for a moment. The trees rustled overhead. A breeze slipped through, carrying the scent of dry leaves and motor oil. I whispered to the quiet, "You gave me a broken garage, but I built myself from it." And I meant it. You don't always get justice in courtrooms. Sometimes you get it in garages, and in the silence after you stop apologizing. Sometimes what we inherit isn't just property, it's silence, patterns, and pain we didn't cause but are expected to carry. This wasn't just about a garage or an apartment. It was about finally standing up to a legacy of being overlooked. Have you ever been treated like the lesser one in your own family? Left out, erased, or quietly pushed aside? If this story resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. let's talk about the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your worth. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life family stories just like this one.